Tired of the noise upstairs ruining your peace and quiet? I'm going to show you how to permanently reduce noise transfer between floors with a few basic building materials you can find anywhere and some good building science so your house stays quiet for good. So introducing the star of the show today, it's going to be the Rockwell Safe and Sound. Now, there are two different kinds of Rockwell products out there. There's the Safe and Sound, and then there's a thermal insulation product. They are manufactured differently, they react differently, and so don't confuse the two. You can't use this for a thermal barrier on your wall. Let's just get this opened up. Step one. It's not 3.5 inches thick yet. It's shipped under compression, okay? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut it just about a foot or so using this handy dandy saw, okay? Go to the Home Depot, it's made by Husky, they carry it there. It's around 10 bucks, worth its weight in gold. Trying to cut this material with a stainless steel blade like this will drive you nuts. Your blade will get dull. Dull blade's a dangerous blade. We're gonna start over here. So we're going to do the standard bay installation first, and then we'll talk about the trickier ones where you have your ductwork for your heat runs and that sort of thing. So it comes the right width. We want to stick this in nice and tall, right up against that floor joist, okay? The reason I cut it is because I'm going to stagger my joints. Because I'm going to have a joint and another layer, I don't want those joints to line up because that's where the air is going to allow that noise to travel through. So by cutting it and offsetting it, I get a great stagger. So we'll take the next full piece now. We're going to go above our electrical, and you're going to find that when you're renovating, if you talk to your electrician and tell them what your plan is for your insulating of your ceiling, they will drill their holes in the middle of the stud bay or the joist bay for you and make it a lot easier to put your insulation in. Now over here, I have a thermal barrier. I am intentionally leaving 2 inches here. It's my system, my recommendation. Leave a little space here. Just because it's not made for thermal doesn't mean it doesn't block thermal, okay? It still will affect it. And in the wintertime, upstairs, if you don't allow a little bit of the heat from downstairs to pass through on this outside exterior area, you're cutting off the ability for that floor to stay warm, right where it's meeting up with your thermal barrier upstairs. So usually a drafty spot is where you're most likely to get cold. And if you don't allow just a little bit of heat to come up through here, that part of the floor will have more expansion and contraction over the lifetime of the house. And that's where you're going to get gaps and cracks showing up in your hardwood. So I'm recommending leave a 2-inch space here right at the end of the wall for the purpose of preserving your hardwood floor installation. If you have a floating floor, you can go in nice and tight. But for me, I'm going to leave that gap there so I allow the heat to get up to that space around the perimeter of the wall. Again, I'm maintaining that 2 inches of airspace. And there we go. Now I'm in. Now the joint is covered, okay? I don't have a continuous space here for the sound to travel. That's all there is to it. You don't have to do much cutting until you get to the very end. So the next area I want you guys to pay attention to here is right here. And that, whoa, is my hose bib. All right, I got a scenario where I've got to get my sound barrier in here. And in the same way that I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit of a gap, okay? So that I had some heat going up to my hardwood floor in the future. I want to make sure I also have heat coming to this section right here. This area right here, this last 1.5 inches of that pipe, whether it's a traditional frost-free tap or it's an aqua valve, needs to stay warm, all right? You don't want that getting frozen. It'll just promote longevity of the product so you don't have issues down the road. So we're going to take our insulation barrier all the way to about 1 inch from the outside on the top. And then we are going to do something a little different underneath. Okay, so there I got about 1 inch gap, and that is for heat to rise up to my floor. And now I'm going to measure and cut a piece of sound insulation. Okay, just shy of my handle, that's 40 inch. And I'm going to install that one, and I'm going to leave this area here so that my warm air in this room will transfer through, keep this air cavity nice and warm, crawl up behind, hit my hardwood flooring upstairs, and that'll protect me long term. That looks great. Now, the next area you want to deal with is pot lights, okay? You'll notice 2 pieces of this insulation, not compressed, is 7 inches. 7 inches gives me a nice airspace underneath, okay? And so the purpose of that is, when I get that other barrier in there, I can have my pot light here, I can wire it, I have a control box, it's going to go up through the hole, through the drywall. I can slide it to the side, okay? If I put my insulation in too thick, I've got nowhere to work with. It also allows me after the fact, if necessary, I can add more lights, okay? because I'm going to be using a hat channel here, and it gives me enough depth that I can run wire over to a new location. And in that same place, again, I have the same issue. I'll have airspace where I can just push the bat up out of the way. Give yourself that flexibility. There's lots of times that people run the wiring package and they'll have a scenario in mind, and then they change the use of the space and they'll want more lights, okay? And so in that situation, because these are LED, we can put 100 lights on the same switch. All right. Beautiful. All right. Woo. The next issue we want to tackle with is the ductwork. All right. Now I have a system for this, and it is a little bit of work, but it's worth it. This is going to be the weak spot in the whole ceiling. Because of the duct, because the air is flowing, because it's hard to insulate properly, every other attempt other than what I'm going to show you is going to fail, and it's going to cause a huge disappointment. Step one is to take this ductwork out altogether and start with an empty cavity so that we can do the first installation to get a certain amount of mass before the pipe is even reinstated. We'll show you how that's done right now. So you want to just lift your cover. You're going to see an old boot, all right? And the way that they attach them, by the way, get yourself this bear claw for this situation. The best tool on the market. You want to just get in here behind these nail heads, and then you can pop the nail out. And I want you to save them because you're going to want the same nail when you go to put it back in again, okay? And they're going to find that they're going to be all the way around. There we go. Okay, let's disengage everything, and then we can start insulating. All right, so it's important to remember, or to know, sorry, that the heat runs are done from the main trunk line, and then they move to their extension. So you start way back here. And generally speaking, in order to get enough space, you can feel around the pipe right here where the collar is, see if there's any screws. If not, there we are. Apparently back in 1974, they didn't screw their ducting together. That's not normally how it's done. So if you have no screws, be careful. Not uncommon for them to be in 36-inch lengths. Ay, 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 ay. Here's my system. We're going to take the regular insulation bat that's 3.5 inch, go above the pipe, same thing, all the way into the furnace cavity. Okay. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of this. We're just going to cut to fit. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So we've got a 3.5 inch piece, and that'll have some benefit. Then we've got the ducting, and then we've got this little metal bar that's hanging, okay, to help support it while it's being installed. We also have this thing here, believe this or not, these little dampers, the little metal arms. You look inside, it opens and closes, so it creates a restriction or it opens up the airflow. Back in the day, we didn't have any math or science attached to ductwork. We just ran a trunk, ran a line, and you would open and close these to kind of get your house balanced out so it wasn't too hot or too cold in any one room. And then at the register, the floor grate, you could actually open and close that as well to help balance different seasons. But if you're going to close your ceiling, make sure these things are open, or take off the wing nut and disengage this all together. Here we are. And get this out of your house, okay? You don't want to have it involved at all. It is a restriction. It's not helping you balance anything, and then you don't run the risk of accidentally closing it and then putting your ceiling up, and then you have a cold room for the rest of your life. You can't figure it out. All right, so be careful of that. We are going to make a modification here with this, all right? This little doohickey is a great little hanger, but it's in the wrong location for us. Everything in old days was nails. So you gotta have this bar to get the nail heads out. We're gonna lift this up. Give us about 2 inches of space. And the same for the other side. Now you only need 1.5 inches, but with the 2x10 joist, you got the room to go to 2 inch, so don't be afraid. All right, now, what we have underneath is not enough space for another bat. You're only gonna have 1.5 inches to 2 inches of space, okay? So the secret to this is a little bit of experience. We have a product from Rockwool that's used for mostly commercial situations. It's like an exterior insulator. So this product here is called Rockwool Comfort Board 80, all right? It's fire resistant, vapor permeable, and water repellent. It is designed as an exterior thermal insulation. This is one way that you can add a thermal barrier on the outside of your house. Now, it's not designed for sound, okay, but it is still very much mass. It does come in a board, which is handy because we can cut it to fit. And because it's a rock wool woven fabric, it still eats sound. So is it the perfect solution? No. But is it perfect for this situation? Yes. And this is my weapon of choice. So what we're going to do is we're going to block the air coming from the other room. We're going to block the noise coming from above. We're going to measure our cavity, which should be 14.5, and it's pretty consistent. We're going to hold the knife to the edge of our tape like this. Measure out to 14.25. Lock the tape, set it on the board, and use your finger as your guide. Just like cutting drywall. Okay? Now we've got a score, we've got a line that we can follow. What you end up with is a whole lot of waste. So, I did that just to show you. What you should do is measure the other direction, so you use smaller pieces. But, for the purpose of this demonstration, let's just show you how wonderful this is as a solution. All right, here we go. I have this just a little bit too tight. There we go. There we go. Okay, there's our thermal situation now, okay? Now this one's actually a little bit long. It's gonna make it difficult to install the next piece, so we'll stick it in a minute. Now, you can see that when you put these ducts together, they don't make a perfect circle. So the secret to doing this is when you're installing, you wanna squeeze as you turn, manipulate the shape, so you can slide it over the other duct. All right. Run over, make contact. Now you'll notice one end of the duct is going to be flat and even flared from cutting. The other end is going to be crimped. Okay? There's actually a special pair of scissors you can buy that crimps this, and what it does is it creates a flare inward, so it reduces the diameter of the pipe. And that's how they stick together. Okay? We'll start first just by holding it, see if we get lucky, and we did. Okay? If not, just pump and squeeze and rotate while you're pushing, and you'll feel the resistance, and you can kind of climb over top of it by manipulating the shape of the duct. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to take a piece of block. We're going to hit in the middle so we can really engage that and make sure we got a nice stiff fit. Remember, galvanized metal is sharp even when it's not cut. So don't fuss around with it, and if you feel more comfortable, wear gloves by all means. Now the only other thing we have to do here is satisfy our electrical code. All right, and that means this. We need to take a piece of insulation and put it between the wires and the ductwork, just like it was before. Now remember, this is on you. This should be inspected after the wiring goes in. And the inspector's gonna want to see that insulation, and it acts as a thermal break between the hot air in the ductwork and the wires so they don't overheat and cause a fire. It won't happen in 10 minutes, it's gonna take years, but the point is if you don't reinstate that and you got a house fire, it's your own fault. So there's a reason for this. Make sure you do it, okay? It's not just an old wives' tale. This will actually save your life. Now we can come back with our 14.25. Boom, reinstate that. And that's the process. And we're gonna keep on doing that in layers until we get right to the very end. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna check to see if we can install this in the existing hole with that insulation in the way. There's the height of my plywood, and yes, it causes a little compression, but it's going to work. Oh my goodness. I might even want to cut that hole just a little bit bigger up there. I think the original contractor cut the hole a little small. Shouldn't have to fight that hard to push that in. If you find yourself in a situation where you have too much slope one way or another, you can take the same system and invert it. So you, for instance, you could put the rigid board here. It's only 1.5 inches. So that there's enough room to get this in, because that's really represents subfloor plus insulation. Now, because it compresses, it still works. But if you want, you can, the last couple feet, you can go to the rigid board, push this up nice and tall, and then put the bat underneath. That's another option, okay? Now, I gotta get my pipe on here. Again, we're gonna put the joint to the top, and These metal bars are redundant at this point. Okay, we'll get them and the wiring pulled down. There we are. Come back here. There we go. Give it a shot. Beautiful. Here's my boot. Here's my register vent. These are designed to be a little smaller than the boot. And so, in theory, they should fit in without too much difficulty. But you see how the ends are all compressed? It's really hard to get that. That's not how I want my product to work. So let's find out the problem here. Yeah, I can barely get it in front to back, and then I'm tight over here as well. We're just gonna create a little bit of extra space. That fits so much easier. So we gotta wiggle this in here now. Okay, and then we've gotta pull it forward into that hole. Okay, now we're through the hole. So what I like to do when I'm doing this is I'll deal with the lead edge first, because it's being bent up. This is high. I'm not gonna go with the same hole, because it won't grab as well. And remember, you're dealing with something like a 5/8 plywood or OSB. So nailing it near the top. Try to get it as flat as you can. Mission accomplished. 14 1/4, little toy like a tiger. All right, 14 1/8 is better. Just finished talking about taking out the dampers out of the ductwork. And you might be saying, oh, Jeff, what if I still need to balance my stuff? I need a damper. Nowadays, instead of using a boot into a ceiling, we're using just a 90 elbow. And then this is designed to fit in that elbow under compression. So you stick this in the ceiling when you're all finished. And this comes with this little flywheel action here. You can open and close this whole damper system and get as much or as little air as you need. So that is completely closed off. So in a warm basement, for instance, in the summertime, you don't really need air conditioning down here that much. You can crack it just a touch to get a little airflow. But in the wintertime, or if you're in an older basement and you need to have that airflow because it's the dehumidification process that you're looking for, you can open it up like that. Or you can open it up like this, and you can get all the airflow that you possibly want. This gives you an incredible amount of control to bring the whole house to balance. If everything in the basement is done with this system here, you can create a perfect balance in your home. You don't have to worry about whether or not those little stupid dampers are open or not. Now, the way this works, these elbows, they have a fat side and they have a skinny side. And when you line up all the skinniest sections, it creates a perfect 90, and this comes out flush. Then you take your tape, okay, and you can seal up this gap. When you're working with this stuff, you might want to wear gloves, because any cut metal will come right through that tape and slice your finger wide open. I like to live on the wild side, trust my callus and my experience. Here we are. Now this is a situation where my strapping is actually in the way. So I am going to work it in smaller sections, okay? Get both sides, lift the insulation out of the way, come over the top. And I'm gonna press down both sides of this because this is cut sharp. If you wanna work blind, fold it like this. So it's like L-shaped, okay? And then you can just lift it up into position. There we go. And then the last little bit will be for underneath. Create that L shape in it. I'm gonna slide it underneath here. There we go. Now that is a perfect air seal if you're interested in that kind of efficiency. Don't forget, a little piece for the hole where the damper used to be. Right here. There we go. Now, ready for the rest of the rigid installation. All right, guys, introducing Sickaboom, right? 1, 2, 1. It's a spray foam insulation that's designed to be from a can with a 6-inch wide spray. And it will make contact with the surface and it'll foam up, and it is a great insulator for thermal and sound. All right. So what we're doing here is we're going to be layering this on top of our tin can here, that is our cold air return. And what that will do will separate this living space from the airspace above, because cold air returns can take all that conversation noise transfer down to the next room. And since there's no room to really pack insulation underneath there, this is our best option. So this stuff is kind of fun. It sprays a 6-inch wide spray. Okay, only when the can is upside down. There it is. All right, and it's messy as all get out, so you're going to want to have some control over the environment. I just took the insulation bag and laid it out. What we're going to do is we're going to let it set up, and then we'll hit it again. In the meantime, I'm going to take some scrap, and we're going to run it across the bottom of my metal hat channel before it sets up, because I don't want it being that thick in that environment. And over here. All right. Yeah, she's messy, but she works. So while I'm waiting for a few minutes before that's set up, I'm going to put in my same insulation as I'm using in the ceiling, because it's 3.5 inch, perfect for 2x4 wall. And we are going to insulate for sound my stairwell and my furnace room wall, so that we can make this just the most perfect, comfortable environment to be hanging out in. In a modern age, guys, where people are using their living spaces for more than just one function. Like, we're not just using bedrooms to sleep. People are living there, they're working there. It just doesn't make any sense anymore to not insulate for sound from one room to the next. And this is a way to separate one room from another very cost effectively and provide that kind of soundproofing that gives you privacy without having to spend a fortune. All right, that's close enough, right? Let's get the next layer on here, guys. We can always trim back the rest of any of those other issues with a saw or a knife. We got about 1 inch of foam up there, and that is going to give you a really, really good separation between any vibration in that metal and sound that will transfer in the room. That's money in the bank. So now that we've got our room prepped, the next step, of course, is drywall. And if you want to see the video about how we drywalled and the materials we used to continue on with this soundproofing technique, we did the whole room in a live show, and if you missed it, you can watch that video right here. Well, cheers till next time.